Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. Getting started a bit later tonight, getting closer to the witching hour. It is 12:23 a.m. where I am right now, and I'm usually asleep by now, but tonight I'm going to be up a little bit later. So tonight I want to talk about how nothing makes sense anymore. And that's really the title of tonight's podcast. Nothing makes sense anymore. I don't know where you can just start anywhere, really. Start with money. How many of these money guys are there on YouTube and BitChute? And, the money guy has been a mainstay of the alternative media pretty much since its inception. Money guy. I mean, they're everywhere. I mean, you got Gerald Salent, you've got Jim Wiley, you've got the Dollar Vigilante. I mean, they're just like, there's so many people who've made their bones giving edgy financial advice from an alternative reality perspective. A perspective heavily influenced by the alternative media. Okay? Now, we're either coming up onto their moment of truth where they're all going to be proven right, or we're not going to hit it. And I can't say which one it is. And I truly mean that, because I don't think anything is predictable anymore. There seems to be a force holding things up, whereas it should be falling down, it isn't. Like, I'm pretty amazed that this Western economy has crawled along for, just shy of 20 years since the 2008 collapse. So maybe, I was going to say maybe we should revisit that a little bit, but I don't want to just go over it again. I'm going to have to assume a certain amount of intelligence amongst my listeners and hope for the best. But you could make a credible argument about how the economy can even still be up after 2008. The extraordinary measures taken to keep the Western economies alive. Okay, so what do I mean by extraordinary measures taken? Well, for the first time in the history of central banks, and this would have only been about 1913 to 2008, just shy of a century of central banking in the United States. Okay, just shy of a century, off by about 5 years, 95 years. But it wasn't always purely fiat. Up until Nixon, the United States backed up its currency with gold. Okay? Now, we were taking off gold to amplify the money supply to stimulate the war effort. And here I'm talking about the Cold War. Now, a lot of you young people, you don't remember it. It was over before you were born. It was over, 5-7 years before my son was born in 97. But it was a defining characteristic of my life and a lot of people my age or thereabouts. So it ended when I was in my early 20s. So all of my formal teen years going through the process of politically digesting my reality took place within a Red Dawn reality. I mean, the original with Patrick Swayze, right? Wolverines, It's just insane what we lived through in the 70s and 80s. It's just insane, man. Just the amount of shit we lived through. And the more you think about it, there's always been something, some idea out there. The idea of doom started to become a permanent fixture of Western consciousness. I'd say historically looking at it after World War II, but in my own life, I'd say it starts with the ozone layer in the 70s. That was the big thing there's a hole in the ozone layer because all the ladies are using hairspray and aerosol cans, don't you know? Hole in the ozone layer, and this hole in the ozone layer would allow in certain forms of radiation. Say what you will about the Abrahamic religions, they only created one hell. Science seems to recreate hell every decade. It's one of their favorite pastimes, the scientifically created hell. Ozone layer. Polar caps are melting. The big earthquake's going to hit California any day now. The Earth's magnetic pole is going to flip. Right? And the economy's going to crash. Well, if it was going to crash, it would have crashed in 2008. It didn't. They had to invent something to keep it going. They actually invented one of the most brilliant adjuncts to central banking ever, and complete farce, to be honest. Economically, it's a complete farce. Quantitative easing is what they call it, which was the first sign that the West was bankrupt. So we started issuing money outside of the normal market process by which a central bank can generate capital. And that is to sell treasuries. And a treasury is an investment in a nation. Just like you buy stocks in a company, you buy treasuries from a nation. They represent secure holdings. Okay, so treasuries would operate as a primary deposit in a bank. So the treasuries could be leveraged to issue the money loan on the 20-to-1 fractional reserve lending rate. So if you buy $1 billion worth of treasuries, you have lawful permission under the Bank Act in the United States and Canada. They're all synchronized now. It's like synchronized swimming. They all link up through the World Bank, the IMF, and the Bank of International Settlements. And that's why they can do all the sanctions, because they're still the main wire transit route for capital now in the official banking record. Ergo, the United States is the world's KPMG. They reckon themselves the accounting firm that's managing the world. Okay? Well, that's quite a statement. And who gave them that job? I suppose it was an affectation of being the de facto leader of the world. Nobody ever said the United States was leading the world, but it was assumed after the Cold War. And it was a poor assumption because there's been little or no leadership. There was no guiding vision behind America other than make America great again, which is the natural rebound point for a collapsing country, is to rebound into radical self-interest the way America has right now. Okay? So, I guess what I'm saying here is if you want to lead the world, you got to lead the world. If you want to be the team captain on a baseball team or a hockey team or a lacrosse team or a soccer team, well, then you better act like the captain. You better provide moral support. You better provide strong game leadership for the other players. You better be a morale booster. You better be able to take the team out of the dark and into the light and help them win games. That's what a captain does. Okay? Now, Lord knows these are not normal times. There's absolutely nothing normal about anything anymore. I feel like sometime in the recent past, we just crossed some line and we're living in a fully Fortean reality now. I'm just waiting to watch rocks gently float down to the earth. So I can't understand why the financial system is still standing. It's a faith-based system. So like all dogmas, it's going to be a long time dying, and some people will never give it up. But they can't seem to kill this thing, man. They've tried everything. They cannot kill the US dollar. And they've been, when I say they, I mean your own government. They've been trying since Obama. Well, I'd say since Bush Jr., since 2011. They've been trying to just take the United States out. Slowly, little bit by bit by bit by bit, like a beaver chewing away at a tree trunk. You just, it just keeps going, stops to listen, to see if there's any creaking in the wood, if it's going to fall. It's quite something to see a beaver take down a tree. I've never seen it live, despite my Canadian heritage. I've only ever seen it on NFB documentaries, National Film Board of Canada. Everything is a major government enterprise in Canada because we don't have enough people or capital to finance anything independently. All movies are made with the government. All books are published with government grants. It's a fucking socialist country. There's no culture to speak of. I mean, it's just a bland, corporately drawn out, cheap pasta and margarine with a little bit of salt. If I were to make Canada a dish, it would be pasta with melted margarine and table salt. Okay? It'll fill you up, but not much more. Nothing makes sense anymore. Okay? I mean, nothing. You've got an education system that is cranking out people that, well, surprise, surprise, want to destroy the country they're living in. Okay? Now, why would that be surprising, given what we've heard from the professional academic class? I mean, what in the fuck are these people thinking? Are they so far gone in their self-delusion that they don't realize that there is no coming out of what they're proposing? That they're slitting their own throats as well? And don't for a moment try to suggest to me that they're that high and mighty and moral, that they're making a Christ-like sacrifice. They're sacrificing their lives and their well-being for the greater good of humanity. That's not what they're doing. So what are they doing if that's not what they're doing? It's a collective insanity. Okay? But there's a character, and let's go over to the medical system. What's the medical system done for you lately? How many decades have they been researching cancer now? And they accidentally let the cat out of the bag during the pandemic, that ivermectin and various other things may be effective with cancer now as well. Now, every time somebody goes to accuse now, they're really confessing. Okay? If you hear somebody accusing somebody now, they're probably confessing. It's just the way the world's working now. It's like some, Photoshop filter got put on all of us. It's like that Jim Carrey movie, Liar, Liar. We can't get away with shit anymore. Have you noticed that? Like, you gotta be like in a pretty centered space right now to survive. I don't know how liars and thieves and people like that are dealing with it. I mean, they must be coming apart at the hinges, right? I think all of these underworld collectives, like the ones I write about in The Devil in Us, I think a lot of them are coming apart too. They're just coming apart, man. They can't see a future. They're getting a little pessimistic. Yeah, it's not the good old days of the rituals anymore. So I don't know how to look at this anymore, man. I don't know like which end is up anymore. I know what's going on in my life. And my life's very simple. Very simple day to day. Got a fair bit of nothing done today. Just kind of a lollygagging day. I have those days up here. I got a little bit of meditation done, but I'm not really back in rhythm yet. I'm just kind of coasting on all the visitors I've had in the last 14 months and that sort of thing. But we were quite disciplined when Bob and my son were here, but I got to get back into it now. Yeah, I can't make sense of anything anymore, man. It's like this entire reality has been suspended, right? And you're just waiting. Everybody I'm talking to now, it's like, what are you doing? Well, they're waiting. What are you waiting for? I'm waiting for the collapse. Collapse of what? It's almost like they can't even believe that the Western world is still standing. But it is a structure built with some resilience. It's not, I don't think, an extremely fragile thing, because they've been trying to break it for quite a while now, and they're having a difficult time, right? So is this dollar going to collapse? Well, who wants the dollar to collapse? Okay? And like nothing makes sense anymore. I was talking to somebody off air tonight, and we got to talking about the collapse, and I said, I can't even say for sure anymore it's going to come. And my rationale is simply this. I think, and this is just one guy's podcast. And by the way, if I don't say this often enough, this podcast is for entertainment purposes only, So I'm just a guy speculating on a hypothesis. I know I don't know nothing. That's me outwitting AI. But it's amazing that this whole system is still even standing and still going forward. Now, the reason I think it may not collapse is what I call the blood economy. I've explained this before on the Talamanca Review, but very briefly, there's a way at looking at cost and overhead and debt, and you can do this on a nation-by-nation basis. And I'm pretty sure that this is maybe not as directly as I'm going to talk about it tonight, but I think that in high circles of diplomacy, these topics are breached. Okay? And so what we're talking about is the inverse economy. Now, the inverse economy suggests that you cost something to keep alive, no matter what you do or no matter how productive or unproductive you are. It has nothing to do with how much you pay in tax or anything like that. It just has everything to do with you being alive. Here we're talking about the caloric energy to keep you alive, which is your food intake, your nutrition. It doesn't have to necessarily be nutritious, but you have to have a caloric intake to have energy. You can worry about health effects after decades of bad eating, as the average North American is doing right now. So the inverse economy is one in which your heat, your food, every source of income or true unit of energy or measurement, not a fiat note, but like liters of gasoline or propane to keep you warm in the winter. All of these things, they can be factored down to a basic quotient, right? Unless you go off and live in the woods and just throw up a tent in a lean-to or something and bathe in the river if you're not living in a winter place. But, you're going to cost something to keep alive. And the higher your lifestyle, meaning that if you have a single dwelling residence, like even an apartment, and you just live there, you got a stove, you got a fridge, you have lights, you have a computer, you have to be heated. There's a boiler in the basement to heat the hot water. Yeah, would you believe me if I told you that all of that stuff is roughly calculated, and it goes into a global energy metric, and then they come up with the cost per head of keeping a person alive in a society, per head in the society. Now, the society can fractal off into micro societies. It doesn't have to be one nation. You could live much more cheaply in a rural area of Canada than you could in Toronto or Vancouver or Montreal. Okay? But nonetheless, the electricity to feed you, the lights to keep your house lit, the heat to heat your home, the air conditioning in the summertime, all of that gets factored in, and they come up with a quotient of what a human life is worth. Okay? And then they start to look at it in the books, and they say, well, do you know how much money we'd save in terms of allowing X number of hectares on the planet to relax for 2 or 3 seasons, to regenerate the soil and get natural microbes back into it, because we've been dumping highly toxic fertilizer on it for a decade and a half now. So we could do this, and this if 1 billion or 2 billion people suddenly disappeared. And this is what it would mean in terms of added wealth and nutrition for the remaining, whatever the population is now. If it's 7, remaining 5 billion. If it's 9, remaining 7 billion. But I don't think we're being told the truth about the population. I think it's lower than what they're telling us, significantly lower. Okay? And I don't know how low I would go. I don't know, 6.5 billion people, but that Lay M woman has really captured my imagination. I've been watching a number of her videos, and she's saying some stuff about China. Now, there's a couple sources I trust on China. There's a South African gentleman who lived there for a decade, and I think married in that part of the world to a woman who speaks Mandarin, either mainlander or a Taiwanese, one or the other. He's fairly reliable, and he's corroborating a lot of what she's saying. Okay? And then I looked for more information, and it's out there if you keep looking. Holy cow, folks. China may be as far down as 600 million people. Okay? So that's 800 million that have disappeared from their alleged high of 1.3 billion. That's 830, if it's 600 million, that's 830 million people who've disappeared. Conservative estimates put it at about 900 million. And I mean, when I say conservative, they want to favor the higher number. That's what I mean by conservative. Most people come in around somewhere around 700 million, but some people are going as low as 600 million now. Begging the question, where did all the Chinese people go? Well, you can only speculate, I suppose, but I suspect that it works somehow like this. Everybody meets, and a broad idea is thrown out, and a lot of foot stomping is done, and it has to do with population. And there's talk about regulated birth control in all the nations of the world, in the United Nations. And then people start to talk about one thing or another, and generally the idea is spread around that it would be really great if everybody lost anywhere from 30 to 70% of their population. Well, I can tell you the Chinese would go out and do it. They're unbelievably ruthless in that way, in terms of the way centralized power looks upon the commoner. There is no arrogance in the public space like Chinese leadership over a controlled population. They are celestials walking 6 inches off the ground. You're a dog walking on 2 feet. China has a class system like you cannot believe. You think the Cultural Revolution was the first mass killing in China? Chinese have been killing mass Chinese as long as Europeans have been killing mass other Europeans. And it's it's not really that different than the European situation. The European situation was complicated by many different languages, but they're all coming off of the same basic root, right? There's two roots. There's Cyrillic and Latin. And I think there's this wild card in Hungary. They don't know where the Hungarian language came from. And of course, you've got, the Yiddish, which is a derivative of Hebrew. Okay? So that's Eastern European Hebrew. They created their own language, the Eastern Jews of Europe, called Yiddish. And yeah, that's where the Ashkenazi come from. Is they're the Yiddish people. Okay? So I'm telling you, I mean, nothing makes sense anymore. This financial system should be done. Everything should be done. But really, maybe what is holding it up? Well, I think the plant is holding it up. That they, as people begin to die off, they don't want any big panic in the crowd. They just want you to quietly go over there and die. And as this keeps happening, we're going to have more of everything. Maybe this is the reason they're bringing so many people into Western Europe and North America, that they're expecting all the people who followed the medical orders to die off, because I think that's going to start kicking off in a big way. I mean, it already is. I mean, everybody knows people now. Okay? Everybody knows people who've had heart attacks, who have had some health complication. The statistics are in now, generally. I saw them advertised today. There's something like 7 to 15 million dead, 30 to 60 million vaccine injured or disabled, vaccine disabled, up to 60 million globally, and up to 900 million, 800 to 900 million vaccine injured. Not disabled, but injured. Well, holy shit, man. That's if we're down to 7 billion people, that's 1 in 7. Thank you very much, World Health Organization. How many do you think would have died if we just let COVID rip through us without any defense other than our immune systems? I don't know. But I do know one thing, the medical system's broken. I sometimes wonder to myself, what secret do they whisper in these people's ears to get them to do this stuff? Because if you know anybody who is heart-centered, and they're in the medical industry, and you've spoken to them in the last year or so, I mean, they know they're killing people. They know. Okay? And if the people who want to talk about it, like my friend, the nurse in Toronto, the Filipino woman, if they want to talk about it, well, I mean, what does that say about all the other people working in the hospital? They're perfectly okay with it. That's just a cost of doing business, man. Like cops shooting somebody. I went into work today. People died. I mean, but how do they let themselves off the hook? How do they say I'm not responsible for that? That's the part of it I don't understand. Again, this is part of my whole thesis to nothing makes sense anymore. Where is the human conscience? Is it we go on and on and on about the Holocaust and what the Nazis did and how German society just followed those orders. Do you see anything like that happening now? Okay? Where are all the free speech advocates? Where are all the people? Where are all the World War II experts telling us we're doing the exact same thing again? Doesn't make sense, does it? And yet here we are. Okay? Like nothing makes sense right now. Okay? Nothing. And I don't think it's going to make sense until this You know, in fiction, they say the job of a writer, a good literary writer, is to suspend disbelief. I'd say in maintaining the status quo we're in now, the trick of the controllers and the propagandists is to suspend belief. Okay? Because there's nothing to believe in. And yet, every day you wake up, you can go to the store, you can buy milk, although you never know how long, or whether you're going to be buying it in silver or crypto next week, or the fiat note is still good. But how can 340 million people go into a depression? It's not possible. We're too organized now. I mean, if it got to the point where, beef or chicken or pork was such and such a price a pound, then everybody would get into pig farming. That's just the genius of the Americans. I guess what I'm saying is that all of this is the affectation of leadership. It's got nothing to do with the people. They just wake up every day, they say, I'm going to do my part, and trust that the government's doing their part. But more and more, it seems like that's not the case. Anyways, nothing makes sense anymore. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been a shorter Talamanca Review.